Hi, and welcome to this latest episode of Step Change Conversations. Today we are joined by Joanna Mangalese, who is a senior researcher for Science for Change. That is an organization that Step Change works very closely with, that promotes collaborative science through engagement with citizens and stakeholders. But they're also partners for New Zero, which recently had their final event that promotes citizen science and science communication. Thank you for joining us today, Joanna.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Chris.
So just as a quick introduction to begin with, could you describe a little bit more the work that Science for Change does and your involvement with New Zero, please?
Yeah, so at Science for Change, we address different challenges such as social, environmental, and health challenges through citizen science, participatory strategies, and co-creation. So our company was funded to exploit the results from the DNOSIS project, which was a citizen science project uh, created by our CEO, Rosa Arias, in order to tackle odor pollution. And this is very much related to New Zero because during this project, they had to incorporate or engage different stakeholders, not only citizens, but also local representatives from public agencies, industries, and also academics. And what they found during the project is that they really needed to have targeted and focused communication strategies in order to involve all of them. And towards the end of this project, Rosa started reaching other citizen science projects and saw that this was a common challenge to all. In fact, in New Zero, one of the first actions that we developed was a survey at the European level where we specifically saw this, that there was a gap to reach different stakeholders, and still citizen science projects was very much focused on the educative side. Um, and there was this need to enlarge the scope of the citizen science project actions.
So yeah, it feels quite a lot like citizen science is becoming a bit more forefront in the way that people are approaching doing research. And in modern society, I suppose citizen science is, along with open science and RRI, I suppose, are kind of reaching out these bridges to between different societal actors. So you work quite closely with the Quadruple Helix, but also with other societal groups as well, to just sort of reach out an arm to between society and scientists and researchers, I suppose. And a major part of that is, of course, the way we communicate science communication, and the way that public engagement is conducted. I'm just wondering, when the New Zero project started, what were your aims to begin with to try and facilitate these kind of this interconnectivity, perhaps?
The New Zero project also started very much taking in consideration disinformation, misinformation, and fake news. And it started in the beginning of 2020, so it was immediately struck by the pandemic, where we saw specifically um, how science and the scientific knowledge was put into question due to a lack, for example, related to defined communication strategies, but also with a lot of influence of misinformation, disinformation in this info media. No, so I think it made even more sense to bring this project into life within the situation that was lived within the pandemic. And one of the things that is defined is not only how citizen science can help to tackle this challenge, but also by the fact that citizens become scientists or citizen scientists, they intrinsically will also become science communicators. As we know, that famous sentence of the science doesn't exist until it's communicated. So automatically the citizen scientists will become or have similar roles to the traditional scientists. So the fact that they are conducting scientific research in a specific methodology, they can also understand the process and therefore enlarge their scope of scientific literacy, and at the same time become what we call micro-influencers in their own communities. So they can also help to tackle disinformation by embodying themselves as science communicators.
No, that's really interesting. So it's kind of by engaging these individuals as citizen scientists, they then go out in their communities and talk about the work you do, and by kind of the transitive properties, they communicate more about the work you're doing and hopefully pass on that kind of literacy to others as they go through the community, I suppose.
Exactly.
So you mentioned briefly before, kind of similar to a lot of projects that have started in the last few years or been running since kind of the onset of COVID, that there was obviously some challenges in doing your public engagement and doing your communication with these societal groups. But as a bit more of a, and in general, what were the same kind of major obstacles and challenges reaching out to these different stakeholders in regards to science communication? Of course, we can talk about COVID a little bit. It's something that's everyone's had to deal with in the last couple of years, but perhaps more of the broader sense as well, perhaps.
So still citizen science is creating an international community, but we also know that there are a lot of national contexts that lack totally of a citizen science community, or at least in terms of being networked. And this is something, for example, that the European Commission has been exploring in a mutual learning exercise in different European countries, where also Jose has been involved with. And we have seen that also not only on this exercise, but in the Nucera project, that are still a lot of different challenges. For example, in the trust in citizen science generated data, a lack, for example, of understanding regarding, for example, industries and cities and citizen scientists in terms of possible conflicts of interest. For example, regarding other scientists, there's still a lack of agency as well in terms of the methodology of the citizen science that is applied. So you can see a lot of different challenges that are common within the projects that can affect the communication and the trust, at least in this methodology.
I suppose it's kind of combining kind of the needs of creating these communities of your citizen scientists that you're working with, but also creating a network of within the citizen science community as a whole, like between projects, sharing information, this mutual learning, just because it is an evolving kind of practice, perhaps. And yeah, just to try and encourage more projects to sort of see the benefits of citizen science, they need to work together within these communities, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things, one of the recommendations that we do when you're starting a new project is to team up with other projects, try to gather different successful case studies, also to convince others to believe in yourself and support your cause or your project. So yeah, definitely teaming up with others within already existing network, like for example, the one created in European Citizen Science Network, or even in other national contexts. For example, in Spain, within the Observatory of Citizen Science, there was also a good community. Very recently, in Italy, there was also created the National Citizen Science Association. So we always, as we say, we can grow in the shoulders of giants. No, there's this kind of sentence. So there's a lot of work that is already being done that can be used, not in order not to duplicate efforts and grow from others' experience.
I suppose that leads me quite nicely to my next question, I suppose. A major part of the Nucera development plan was to organize these citizen science CitSciComm labs, which obviously, well, you invited representatives from other citizen science projects, but also science communication experts and representatives from the quadruple helix. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the co-development process with these labs and what were the major outcomes, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. The labs were envisioned to test citizen science pilots. We brought 39 projects into New Zero. The the survey that I mentioned before. So we had 167 valid answers, and from those who participated, we invited them for an individual interview and then selected those that would be part of the New Zero project as pilots. So we also had 150 representatives, both of the quadruple helix and science communication experts to be a part. And with this, we created what we call our community of practice. And the idea is that we will continue to work with this community of practice in a new project that I can talk a little bit later on. What we envisioned were three different steps. So the first one, where we would co-design the communication strategies with the end users who are the target stakeholders. So our projects, some of them have already been working for a few years, so they might be very good, for example, in engaging citizens, but they may have never considered to work with industries, for example. So the idea was that they could work with one of the specific stakeholders from the quadruple helix during New Zero. So then we would bring them together with their end user selected, and also the conversation would be mediated by a science communication expert. So in this first lab, they co-designed communication strategies that they implemented during the New Zero project. And then we would have the second lab where we would work on this implementation, and then we would validate them into one of our major outcomes, which were the creation of blueprints that we just published in our final event. So one of the things that happened during the project was that we had a continuous evaluation through a new impact framework that we also developed within the project, and that is openly available. Through this continuous evaluation process, we detected a lack of capacity building in a lot of the different topics. So we modified as well part of our methodology in order to support the projects in the implementation. So we did a lot of capacity building, for example, in data journalism. We also did for example, in creating a policy action map, although it was a specific lab, all the different pilots were interested and were needing to have this kind of training. For example, also in ethical issues related to communication. And one of the things that also happened was that the members of Nucera that were following up the projects became naturally mentors. So it also became a mentoring program within the project, which wasn't planned in the beginning. So as I mentioned, as major outcomes, we have these blueprints. We also have formal and informal training that will be available on demand in the future. We created also a guide of science communication for projects that are just starting, or also that they want to redefine their communication strategies. And hopefully now we are also trying and going to disseminate our policy brief into specifically the countries that we have worked with, which is Portugal, Spain, and Italy, but we also want to bring this to other national contexts where it can be useful, and that's where communities are just starting.
No, that's really interesting. And the way that you talk about the five blueprints, so they are kind of covering areas such as ethics or policymaking or and income. And with that, you're also doing your co-development and mentoring, I suppose, of really trying to provide kind of yeah, passing knowledge exchange, these things that are really important within. There's if you can do these projects and they can be successful at the time, but if they're yeah, without kind of the legacy going beyond that and having the resources that you can share, uh, they kind of just get lost in the ether a little bit. So it feels like these are really important outputs just to really kind of talk about. Yeah.
Hmm. We also tried one of the things that we focused, although we had a few workshops that were only delivered in Portugal, is that we also wanted to try to tackle the lack of recognition in scientific careers for those who want to implement citizen science projects. And we very much focused on the solutions in terms of institutional, national, and European levels. This has also been included within the policy brief that I think will be very important to follow up with.
It feels like with citizen science, the part of the benefit of it is the transdisciplinary nature of it, but also that's part of the reason why some people don't seem to lack kind of it lacks kind of definition a little bit about what citizen science is because it has quite a wide umbrella about who is involved, I suppose. And yeah, just sort of boiling that down can be quite difficult at times, I see. In March, New Zero officially came to an end. I imagine was a bittersweet time for you all on the team. But you organized your final event, which was focusing on citizen science and science journalism. I was just wondering if you could talk about why you chose science journalism as sort of the focus for your main event and how the work that you've been doing is going to facilitate uh, how the work you do with science journalism sort of facilitates communication to society as a whole, I suppose.
Yeah, so as you mentioned in the beginning, so we went beyond the quadruple helix stakeholders, and we also included science journalists from the beginning, not only science journalists, but also data journalists. And this is because of the intrinsic nature of citizen science, where you have really broad data sets that can be used. So it's also important that these are, as we know, connected to social issues, and thus can engage naturally society in the stories. And we also very much wanted to focus not only on the results, but on the process. Because we have people that are within the neighborhoods collecting data, taking action during the time. And the idea of introducing the science and data journalists is from the very beginning already also have a journalistic perspective, and also the possibility of even having new scientific questions related to this. And the fact that you bring other disciplines to science, and also the social sciences are very much present in some of our projects, is that you can open the scope of action of the scientific process. So I think this is also very important. In our case, we also wanted to engage more the public, so we created an exhibition called Data for Cityside News, where we showcase some articles that were created in a pairing program between our projects and citizen science, and data journalists, so that we can have a real focus on visual journalism and storytelling through visuals. In order to tell the stories and the process of each one of these citizen science projects. And we really want to inspire others to do the same, and also have, for example, a focus of cross-border stories that citizen science can help to tackle. For example, we have one of our projects works with freshwater. So within Spain and Portugal, that was created a working group. And in this way, we can try to cover a geographical area that has the same rivers, and also have stories that include different municipalities or even small villages that, as we know, journalists are also struggling to survive. So the fact that we connect with this small or local media can also better engage the communities within journalism itself.
I suppose it's kind of balancing the providing useful information so journalists can report on scientific stories in a responsible way. So, of course, we talked a little bit before about the spread of misinformation and fake news, which is just a bit of a plague. Pardon the terminology upon kind of science communication and news as a whole. But also, it seems like an important part was recontextualizing and making these issues feel more local to these communities that it might affect them at some point, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what comes next for New Zero? I know the project has officially ended, but you talked briefly about the trainings that you're doing and the blueprints that you've created. But yeah, in the wider scope, yeah, what do you hope that comes next for New Zero, or what sustainability plans do you have?
Yeah, so we are now involved in three different projects that in some way flourished from New Zero in collaboration with others that we shared similarities and common goals. So one of them is Coalesce. So Coalesce will create the European Competence Center for Science Communication. And this was created together with the other projects that were funded within the SWOFS program. So I think it's the first time that all the projects funded by the same call come together into continuing to consolidate all the knowledge created and also continue to explore and expand the network through others and continue to support with everything that we have created before. So this is going to be a big project for the next years where New Zero will have a bigger contribution. We also involved in Impetus. In this case, we got together with other partners, but also the coordinators from the Action Project. And in this case, we will have an accelerator during the next years with an open call, a yearly open call. And in the end, we will fund 125 citizen science projects, both kickstarting and the ones that are looking for sustainability. And this also includes this project, the European Prize for Citizen Science. And then the other project that we are related, which already collaborated within New Zero, is the European Citizen Science Network. So this is a continuation of the platform that already exists. So hopefully also in these projects, we wish to incorporate the communities of practice that we already created in New Zero. For example, in Coalesce, it will be very important to define and have different products that of science communication where citizens are also involved in the very beginning to have different products and services that I think it's important to mention.
No, that sounds fantastic, and it sounds like yes, that New Zero will live on, and knowledge will be passed on through the impetus calls and the trainings that you're doing with these other projects, I suppose. My final question is there anything else you'd like to talk about New Zero or any upcoming projects, I suppose?
Well, I think these are the upcoming projects that we have, but I would really like to recognize all of the work done by the different pilots. We know that, as we mentioned in the beginning of the different challenges, there's still a lack of recognition. We know that there is also lack of funding and lack of time. So these projects or the people that are behind them are really making a big effort in order to make these projects real and try to tackle different societal challenges that we're facing, and all the merit goes to them. So I'd really like to leave this recognition to them.
And yeah, it sounds like through the collective work that you're doing, you're hopefully going to promote citizen science further in the future.
I hope
Thank,
so.
thank you very much for joining us today, Joanna.
Thank you, Chris. It was very nice. Thank you.